Welcome back.
Hey.
Welcome back to another episode of One Love HTX. I was actually scrolling through here looking for something. I wanted to share a message. So first off, thank you for everyone who's been listening. We are rounding out our year of first season of One Love HTX.
Wow.
It's crazy. We're gonna end with
stellar
23 episodes, and it's just blowing me away. 16 countries. Countless downloads that just baffle me on the numbers that are happening out there, people responding, and YouTube channels, the connection with Westcliff through there. I mean, it's just it's nuts. And then this is kind of a surprise. I did tell Duffy already, but just for everyone else out there who's listening, we have an opportunity coming up, and we just ask that you would join us in prayer about it. In 2023, there is a radio station that is connected to a friend of mine who has asked us to possibly go live on Saturday night out of San Antonio, Texas, which would reach a mass of people. And so,
wow.
So to go beyond this, like, what, Lord? What do you want?
You said we're in 16 countries?
16 countries.
That's
now.
16 more than I anticipated.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been blown away with 16 counties.
Yeah.
You know?
I've actually had that comment back. Do you mean counties? And I'm like, no, this is countries. I'm
There's
telling
an
you.
R in there. We promise. Yeah.
It's real. So I just think it's quite fitting looking at where we are. We're in December, coming up to what every church typically does, and nothing wrong with it. You know, the birth of Jesus and the celebration of the nativity, and our children doing all the different things. And I think that's great. And if you have a church you're going to, go support it. There's a lot of effort and love put into those things. But I was just sitting around thinking, and also, again, it's the conversations that lead up to all these podcasts is what, Jesus, from culture to different religions and everything. It's funny. This is a man that I don't care who you are. You've heard the name, right? Kinda. And I'll get to that in a second. But for the majority, I mean, he is the most well-known name in the world, period. And even those religions that might not call him the Son of God, they believe he existed.
Yeah. And
the first question, as I think back, 2009, I got to spend some time in Israel, and I had just an incredible time. But one of the things that happened in Israel is, and I heard this, I was like, well, I mean, how much more is it going to be besides an exciting trip? Is it going to really solidify anything else? And the best thing that was told to me was, listen, Daniel, once you get out there and you start diving in, and you start seeing the places, and you start really studying with your guide, that black and white text and some red is going to turn to Technicolor. And I didn't understand that until I got there and I experienced it. And I'm like, oh. And so from that, and recently that reignited this whole thing with conversations and everything, was a book that I just read by Mark Clark. He's a pastor used to be out of Canada. Now he's out of California, Northern California, who's just very, very insightful about God and Jesus and the scripture and everything. Yeah. But he released this book called The Problem of Jesus. And when I read it, listened to it, it just brought back all these Technicolor things about who Jesus was. Because like one of the things I think we go back to, and that's what this is about, the scandal of Jesus, or who was Jesus, And I think I was brought up, I don't know about you, but I was brought up with what I always say, the Feltmore Jesus. He had the beautiful wavy hair. I mean, I've got some stuff there going on with that. Beautiful wavy hair, the white robe, the blue beauty pageant sash, perfect teeth, smiling, thumbs up. I mean,
feathered hair at that.
Feathered hair, yeah. Good 1970s rock band hair going around. But beyond the look and the pictures that we see, I think we also think Jesus was just this happy-go-lucky guy that was pleasing to everybody and shaking hands and kissing babies and doing all that. And as I read more, as I talk more, as I research more, I'm like, that's not who Jesus was. Yeah. Like Jesus, you don't go 3 years in a ministry and have people want to kill you.
Right. Yeah.
So that's number one. Like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
our thought process is off a little bit of who Jesus was.
Of course.
What did he do that caused people to want to kill him, to throw him off a cliff? And
Yeah.
and I'm going to go ahead and state this. Mark Clark. I've never met you before, but if I plagiarize anything, I'm letting you know ahead of time.
I love it.
There's just so much good information in there. So again, it's The Problem of Jesus by Mark Clark, but we're also going to have The Problem of Jesus by Duffy here in a second, because I want to really get your viewpoint
Yeah.
of who he was. Like, what are we missing, and what did he do in these 3 years that caused people to want to kill him?
Wow.
Who was he? Who was this guy really?
So since you're just going right after it, love it. I think it's important to also examine. We tend to think when we open our Bibles that, like, oh, there's the Jewish people and that's it, because that's what Scripture's focused on. And we forget, like, Buddhism, Hinduism.
Right.
These are religions that are already going.
Before Jesus.
Before Jesus shows up, they're already strong. They're already present.
Right.
Like, you think about the wise men, if you've ever seen that, like, in church, where, like, it's just like 3 kids with giant purple robes, and mom and dad took a bunch of little plastic, like, look like crystals or whatever, and taped it onto a box and painted it gold. And then they bring little baby Jesus, like we reenact all of that.
Right.
Like, if you take a step back, like, let's just look at timeline. Number one, like, probably when the wise men showed up, he's 2 years old. So he's hanging out of the manger. If
Right.
you want to, like, I just ruined your whole, away in the manger scene. Like, he's just hanging out. Like, he's a kid. He doesn't even belong in the manger. So
Right.
you got to blow that up. Number
Right.
one. Number two, someone is not going to travel hundreds of miles to drop 2 gold coins on a kid.
Right.
So the first thing that we may need to do to blow up the way we think of Jesus is, if you were a neighboring nation and they would have been Zoroastrian faith, which shout out, Freddie Mercury was Zoroastrian.
Oh,
By the way.
nice.
There's your cultural reference.
There
That's
you
all
go.
I got. One bullet. All right. You could make the argument that the Far East, that they understood that they wanted to undermine the Roman government and their social structure. And their best chance of doing that would have been a trade partner that they had going back generations.
Right.
Things were good. And they're reading, and they knew the scrolls. If you go back to the Old Testament, where's everybody, Babylon and everything, when their generation, their forefathers were all pulled into slavery or pulled into, exile or what have you, a lot of those prophets ended up in and around those areas. So these people in the Far East knew, like, the prophetic writings as well.
Right.
Whether they believed them is a whole nother issue.
Right.
So, number one, what's their motivation? I think they probably believed that there was a legit, like, okay, this is the Messiah.
Right.
But was their motivation totally like, oh, we came here to worship him to be our God? I don't know about that. It may have been like, hey, how do we get in good, make an investment into who is the next Messiah, and how do we undermine the Roman government? We take the whole story and we move it aside, like they didn't think like us 2,000 years ago.
Right.
They're making political moves. They want power. They want authority.
Right.
They're trying to make things happen on the national stage to blow stuff up too. So
Right.
I'm not saying they weren't in awe, but if you're going to travel that far,
there's got to be some kind of agenda.
it's a caravan, number one.
Yeah.
It's armed.
Yeah.
It's protected.
Yeah.
And you're not going to go that far to give the kids something like in our little churches,
Right.
where we have just a few little gold coins.
Yeah.
So then look at the first problem that you have to introduce. So what did they drop on them when it comes to gold? Frankincense, highly expensive stuff, right?
And myrrh, this thing, I don't even know what myrrh is.
Exactly. And so this is all fine, top grade, like extremely expensive stuff. And it's associated, one is associated with being like a shepherd. One's associated with being a king. One, like it all was symbolic. And so when you're talking about this Jesus and you're like, well, how does this happen? Well, then we know he grows up and he's learned. He's 12 years old and like everyone's blown away at how smart he was.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like to just blow up, like we always just think of like, here's a thought that'll get people. Like, what if he didn't start out poor?
Right.
Whoever said he was poor? Where did that come? He ended poor,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean whenever he tells the rich young man, go sell everything and follow you. If you're a Buddhist, or if you're from like an Eastern religion, why they respect him is they recognize Jesus was a person who didn't just tell people. No great teacher would tell you to do something that they wouldn't do themselves.
Right.
I mean, so you blow up that paradigm. Like if he tells the rich young man, like, go sell everything and follow me.
Right.
What if Jesus at some point sold everything in his ministry or funded his ministry? What if he knew what it meant to have money and walk away from it?
It's funny you say that, because there's also a good friend of mine who did some research, and one of the things that he says is through that gold and all that stuff, that there was a family member, which was, I guess, connected to Joseph or whatever, who was, and there's historical documents of this, who was learned in finances, who that's what they used could have funded Jesus. Like me, I mean, well, I can't say that either. I was about to say One Love. I mean, we don't get paid for One Love, but
no, Black Rifle Coffee Company, we don't. But we love coffee. And continue.
Right. but that's one of the things that we do is, our jobs kind of fund the things that we do. But is that an easy thing for everyone to, I'm not saying we're Jesus by any stretch of the imagination, but who does that?
Exactly. Well, then remember when he goes to Mary, like, where did you think I would be? I'm in my Father's house.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, that's sweet. Like he's reminding her that hey, I'm here to worship my Father. But what if he knew the teachers of the law that were like, yeah, you put me in rabbinical school.
Yeah.
I know that guy, and that guy. Where else did you think I would be? I mean, there could have been two meanings to the discussion.
Right.
And if you, James, that wrote the book of James, he was not a disciple early on. He hated his brother. His brothers, they try to go, hey, why don't you go into town? I'm sure they'll love you there. And scripture points out, like, would have been a group of people that were either going to hurt him or kill Jesus. His own siblings were not a fan of him. They thought he was out of his mind. And if we put it in like our own family situations, when do you have the biggest messes in your family? What's usually involved? I can tell you right now, money.
Oh.
Like what makes siblings turn on each other is usually money. So here's a thought, like brother get oldest, the firstborn gets all this stuff dropped on him. Gold. They all thinking they're going to get taken care of. And then big brother, when he starts his ministry at 30, dumps it, walks away from it.
Wow.
And then they're going, where's my share? Where's my inheritance? Oh, I know. Why don't we just go ahead and get you to go downtown and, maybe they'll beat you up because we hate your guts. Right. I mean, if you just start doing the math. So my point is, when you say, who is this Jesus? There may be a whole lot more to him with the level of sacrifice that he was already showing well before he's ever hanging on a cross. He already showed, I can walk away from the money. I can walk away from the security. And his family didn't get that. They didn't understand that. You know what I mean? And
and I think that's the problem sometimes with the Bible and our own faith is we read these stories and we finish them in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's a process. This is a time of years, of sometimes hundreds of years, and thousands of years, and whatever. And you just gotta, step away and go, wait a second. This is like the eighth of a cliff note.
Yeah. So I mean, like, what do you? I mean, that's just so. All I'm providing, number one, is for our listeners is just maybe some background to rethink the backstory of your question, right? In light of Christmas time and everything. What do you think is, and what are you hearing is maybe a misconception that our listeners have about Jesus? What do you think?
Well,
to come up?
I mean, the first one you brought one up is that born in a manger and the wise men came, and that was one of the ones that I heard that there probably weren't three, and they weren't wise. They weren't like they were scientists and this and that, and one guy even says there was probably 15 or more of these guys that came, but that's and that by the time they got there, just like you said, it wasn't the day he was born. It was later. He had already grown some, and they were probably meeting him at his house or wherever they were at the time. And so now they got this kid that people, not just three, but many are coming to drop these gifts off, like you said, who is learned, who is just, knows the scripture backwards and forwards. and then shows up at John, and John sees him and recognizes him immediately
Yeah.
and says, I've been telling you all these truths, but here comes one. Here's the lamb,
Yeah.
who, and then all of a sudden Jesus gets baptized and comes up, and God says, "This is my son with whom I'm well pleased."
That's it.
Okay, whoa.
Yeah.
That's crazy enough in itself.
Yeah.
What are all these people thinking as this is happening? And this begins his ministry. And it's a 3-year long ministry that is powerful. Again, we go to the scripture, we read this stuff, and we, like the Sermon on the Mount. He probably said that sermon
Yeah.
hundreds of times, not just once. It wasn't that was the big one they took, and that was maybe it was like the culmination of messages upon messages, the same one over and over again, that finally came to this. You got to go see this.
Yeah.
I've heard it before, but I'm going back again.
Yeah. The second showing.
Right.
Here we go. Yeah.
He's back.
Yeah.
So, and I heard he's going to bring food.
Right.
So, but yeah, so then all this starts to go on. And so that's what I start hearing from people is, okay, so he's teaching all this stuff, but people want to kill him. Like, he must have been a disruption. He must have been doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Or are we seeing the picture wrong? Were the people of the time doing something wrong?
Yeah.
And I think that's the funny one. It's like, no, why do you got to blame it on Jesus?
Yeah.
He was just a little dude being born to people bringing him lots of stuff, and he had a purpose. And now we want to crucify him and kill him. But what was he disrupting?
Yeah.
That's the question I get asked a lot. What was he disrupting? Why do they want to kill him so much?
I think we should just put it in our own context. Culture and society is never comfortable with a revolutionary, because usually when a revolutionary is truly sold out, and they always make the biggest mess. Mm-hmm. They can't be controlled. They can't be bought. You can pick other times and other people in society. And then what usually happens is right behind the revolutionary, a lot of people try to clean up some of what they did, try to tie it all together,
right.
Try to begin to build some kind of a institutionalized way of thinking. And then it turns in another group of people flat out turns what that movement was, that was just raw and gritty, into an actual institution. The first group kind of records it, whatever happened. Then everyone goes, okay, well, this is how we're going to formalize, So the revolutionary takes the mountain with dynamite and an axe, blows up stuff everywhere. It's just, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And then the next group goes, okay, well, let's try to put some electricity and some roads, right? And then the last people come in and go, well, this is this neighborhood. It's called this, and this is what it looks like to live here, and this is what it costs, and yada, yada, yada. But the problem is, no different than any other example, is that by the time the institution is up and going, most of the time the institution turns into something that not even the revolutionary would want to be a part of, or wouldn't be accepted into. So to put it plainly, like, would Jesus even get hired in our churches today? Would anybody call him to be a pastor, preacher, teacher?
That's a big question.
Yeah, you bet it is.
It's a loaded question.
And by the time that Jesus shows up, what's the Pharisee sticking point? Back to that first thing about, the wise men, or, the magi showing up, which, by the way, may have looked more like your 80s rocker heroes,
right?
Like dark makeup, the whole nine, like they're deep into astronomy at a minimum.
Yeah, at a minimum.
And it could be even some astrology.
Right. So
there's an interesting thought. Like, the first people that dig him, that get it, that taking him seriously, are from the other, whole other far off distant land. They're not woven into the children of Israel. They're not that pure blood, whatever.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, he's reaching kind of the outsiders. It's fascinating.
And that's also the one, that's something that Mark Clark talks on, is, so you were talking about pre-Jesus, all this other religion going on. What I learned, it's really crazy. There were minimum 5-6 other gods that were born on December 25th, right? That were coming to do, had the same story, but they were, you can't go back. There's nothing tangible to hold on to, but they're great stories. They're great myths.
Sure.
It's part of that culture. So you're saying that about I forgot about the Magi and all that these were there was some strange stuff going on. It
Yeah.
wasn't like they were Christ followers because Christ wasn't around yet, but they weren't also
Yeah, they weren't
they weren't
children of Israel,
right,
Jewish. They're all part of that
right,
deep
right.
history.
So maybe even them, they're going, oh, is this that one that we're going to be able to see it in person?
Yeah.
He's coming again. There's another one.
Yeah.
And this is the first tangible.
Exactly. So these are guys that were reading the stars.
Yeah.
They're in tune with all of that. They know the ancient writings, and they saw things from their perspective that were coming together.
Right.
And they were just faithful enough to be like, we gotta head this off. So right from the jump, you already see that the Roman government is not happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like they already want to undermine. Caesar is already concerned with what's happening, that there's some other king potentially on the rise.
Right.
So, I mean, Jesus is already being thrust into a political system that wants to protect itself. There's already Pharisees and people that are making a ton of money off of people who are hurting, people who want to be in a right place with God. They've already twisted the law of Moses in such a way. One of Jesus's epic rants is he's pointing out that now you have kids who are no longer financially helping their ailing and aged parents because they're giving you money to build your latest and greatest cathedral or whatever it is that you're wanting to do.
Right.
I mean, I'm putting that in layman terms, but that's basically part of his rant. He flips over the tables because what they're doing is they're charging exorbitant interest on exchanging money. So you and I would have shown up with Roman type, coins or whatever, and we would have gone in, but they would go, yeah, you can't use that money. You got to use temple coins.
Right.
Right. But then like, it's not 1-to-1.
Right.
It's like 3-to-1 Roman for what I have for temple currency. So I'm ripping you off hand and foot because I'm telling you, you're walking around with little gods, pagan gods, but I'm also then pocketing the extra money. And then I'm giving you a little sacrifice so that you can feel like with you and your family that your pilgrimage was worth it. That's what set him into orbit.
Right.
Was this incredible, unbelievably hypocritical, and so that's just it. Like, and all of that abuse is what he's.
Yeah. That's the difference too. When you look at, as you're saying again, Jesus didn't want any of that.
Exactly.
And you've got the religious leaders of the time.
Yeah.
Who, they've got their power at stake. They've got their wealth at stake. And this guy's disrupting it, saying, you don't really need all that. You don't have to have any of that. None of that's necessary for what we're trying to accomplish.
Can't buy him?
Right.
What can you do to a man if you can't buy him off?
Kill him.
You have no.
I mean, I wouldn't.
Right. For the record, we would not kill Jesus again. We want that out there.
Right. Or anyone else who's standing in my way. Make that clear.
But you think about it, like, you can't control that guy.
Yeah.
You can't control him. You can't reason with him.
Right.
And the thing that you love the most, he doesn't care anything about.
Right.
He doesn't care about the money. He's not chasing after the things that you're chasing after. In fact, he offends regularly the people that even the disciples are like, hey, I thought that guy was all right. He seemed like a really righteous guy. You just called him a whitewashed tomb.
Right.
You just said he's a hypocrite. You just said he's like the child of Satan. We thought he was a pretty good, priest.
That's pretty offensive.
Yeah.
I know if I got called the child of Satan. Well, actually, I was at one time.
And then on top of that, and then on top of that, you're hanging out with prostitutes, sinners, and tax collectors. So you're not only offending the people that everyone thought were so great, you on top of that don't value what they value. You don't have the same crutch, the desire for money, power, and wealth. And then on top of that, you hang out with everything that the culture and community would have said are dirty. Like they're bad, they're sinners, they're.
Okay, this is good. So you're answering a good question. So listeners, what was Jesus doing that was threatening their finances? Like what was he saying that they were going, we could lose all of this?
Yeah.
Because whatever Jesus was saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it causing them to rethink who they're following? Is that what's going on?
He's exposing them.
Okay.
He's exposing them that they aren't Psalm 51 broken and contrite hearts. He's exposing them that their true God is in their pocket. It's not above. He's exposing that they've drifted that far, and they know they're going to be seen if this keeps going on to be the frauds that they really are. Jesus wore a tunic. Tunic is everyday, every man's look, style of dress.
Right.
He blows them up even for the way that they dress. Like, how much did you spend on this robe? And on, on your way to the synagogue, and how many people did you pass by and not even pay them mind? I mean, he's blowing them up on that level. Not to mention that by the time they go to kill him, the real issue is if they don't get this movement under control, Rome is going to just, Rome is going to just bring down their full fury on top of the Jewish people.
Right.
And so they recognized they either need to get rid of Jesus, or they're going to lose what? Their power.
Right.
Or they need to, if they let him just run roughshod, Rome is going to get involved.
Right.
And then there's going to be a lot of bloodshed.
Right.
So the whole time, what are they really out for? Self-preservation.
Right.
Money, power, authority, position.
So the way I was explained is Rome came in, obviously, and began to rule over them.
Yeah.
And this is a Cliff Notes too. But essentially, the Pharisees, Sadducees, all these guys were like, we're about to go basically into slavery of some sort with these guys. We're going to be over. They're going to be over us. So we got to show them. We got to show the Romans that we are important enough to keep us in our place.
Yeah.
Because if we're not, you're going to lose control of everything, and then you got nothing. So let us help you.
Yeah.
Keep us in our place. And then, of course, as man does, they start to find ways to, jank the system.
That's it.
And get money for themselves.
They're
and now
playing both ends against the middle.
Now this guy's coming along, and he's disrupting that, exposing them, and they're mad.
And hey, think about this: 30 years-ish before Jesus shows up, Rome is a republic. Sound familiar?
Ooh.
What do we talk about? We're a republic. Well, when they have all this inner turmoil and bloodshed, they flip from being a republic to an empire, which then made Caesar not just the leader of a republic, it made him the son of a god. So by the time Jesus shows up, the Roman people have now been inundated with this thinking that Caesar is a god. Moreover, Caesar is the son of a god.
Yeah.
And now someone else is showing up saying they're son of God, the son of God. And now that's a problem for Rome, while at the same time claiming to be the Messiah is now a problem for the Jewish hierarchy. He is a political issue for Rome, because that's where they finally get Pilate going, whoa, you're not going to get involved? You're not going to be a part of this? We're going to say that he claims to be Caesar. I mean, he's claiming to be, head, the guy. This is where they put Pilate in a bad spot.
Right.
If Pilate doesn't help them, they're playing the political angle. You mean you have someone that's claiming to be a king? He claims to be a king. If you do nothing, Pilate, you're complicit, and we're going to turn you in. Then Pilate's going, that's why he finally washes his hands with it.
Right.
Because he doesn't know what to do. It's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Of everybody trying to protect themselves and looking out for power, wealth, influence, control.
Yeah.
And he's the perfect problem, man.
Okay, so here's the other thing.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Oh my goodness. Okay, so here's the other thing. As you're saying all this, I'm going this again. Now I got a Rolodex going, thinking about some of the information that I've heard. Is not only is their power and control, but some of that control comes from the law, right?
Yeah.
And without that law,
you
could have chaos. But again, let's go back to some of our other episodes when we talk about the Jewish law and the laws and the reasons why those things were put into place. And they're put into place for health, for goodness, for a good life.
Yeah.
And as Jesus comes along later on, which is, again, scandalous, basically saying you're not going to be able to do all these. You're just not. So I'm going to take care of it for you. Wait. No. We lose our control if you say that they're just never going to be able to handle this. You have to do it. And guaranteed, I don't even have to go back and prove any of this. Guaranteed, because they're humans, every Pharisee and Sadducee and everything else did not adhere to those laws 100%.
Right.
They just didn't.
Right.
They may have said they did,
Right.
in the whitewashed tomb way,
Yeah.
but they didn't.
Yeah.
And then here comes Jesus even proving a point even bigger, which I never saw this either. We hear the stories of Jesus going out to heal the lepers,
Yeah.
right? And the sick people. Well, okay. What's so wrong with that? And what I heard was that would be like modern day. Okay. We are in, oh, I don't know, pandemic.
Yeah.
and people are being quarantined, and you are not to be around them, and they are to be alone, and they cannot be seen. No family members are allowed to come in, no nothing. And that's who the lepers were on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
They were filthy, they were dirty, and they would defile you as your religion.
Yeah.
Don't go around them.
Yeah.
It's bad. And then Jesus waltzes in, just like, and Mark Clark said this, like he took off his mask, ignored everyone's, and walked in and hugged these people and was with them. That's nuts to me. To hear it on that level is to go, okay, he's basically saying, not only am I God, not only am I not what you have learned power to be, and it's not about wealth, it's not about riches, it's so much more than that. And I'm coming, but I'm going to disrupt all of this. And so those lepers that was a bad deal. He's disrupting and taking away
Yeah.
what they're supposed to be doing, which
Yeah.
scares them.
Yeah.
Right? Wait, you know, and I'm sure most
He's stepping over every boundary that they made.
Yeah.
And every law that they created.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which finally, I remember there was one place in Israel we went on top of, forgot where it was, but it was the place where they had planned, let's stone him.
Yeah.
And the way it was said is that he just kind of waltzed out, like they were one second he's there and 1 second he's not. Oh, quite Jesus. But that, looking at that, like, what, like I'm sitting up there going, why?
Yeah.
Why they want to? And it's becoming more and more clear that he's making people angry. Yeah, because it's their way of life is at stake, and the sheep too are upset. And this is not a political thing with even our time. It's just this is about Jesus, and I think that's what we lose a lot is we try to go into, even putting religion on political figures. Listen, I go back to even when I'm mad at someone, or someone does me wrong or does my family wrong, I want to be angry with the person. And there's only two forces in this world. There's the power and the love of God, and there's the evil and the hatred of Satan. And Satan has come to steal, kill, and destroy.
Yeah.
And so what is it really? Am I getting mad at that person, or am I getting mad at the spiritual battle that's happening?
Yeah.
So looking at that, it's like, yeah, this is not about truly, and that's what he's saying, is this isn't about political agenda. This is not about, your wants and needs. This is about the kingdom. This is about God. This is about your eternity. All of our eternity.
I love it. Well, I would love to, if I can kind of give us this thought to think through, especially this time of year, is, make it personal for you. If someone has really offended you or hurt you, maybe even, God forbid, defiled you in some way, shape, or form, just some horrible experience, think about how we typically react to that individual or those individuals if we were ever in the same room again, right? I mean, so let's just pause on that thought while we're there, right? Is you read throughout the Old Testament, our sin is not just problematic, it's highly offensive to God. Now that's just real talk. That's not just you listening. That's me. That's everything. And then Jesus heightens it up when he shows up, because it's like, oh, I thought it was just about what I did or what I actually said. And Jesus is like, well, yeah, it's also what you think and what you feel, not to mention your state of being. He just pushes it so much further that even if you look awesome, he's like, yeah, you're not. and actually you're kind of a problem with yourself, your neighbor, and with God, you know? And so you go back to that place, and it's interesting how the way God responds to our lack of holiness and our lack of righteousness. And think about how we would respond to that. And his response is to finally go, you know what? I've told you to love me and you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I've told you to live this way and you seem to be that, like, you can't. That's, I mean, you just follow that narrative. So finally, I'm going to show you how I love you.
Mm.
You're incapable of ever getting to me. So now I'm going to come to you. I met your ancestors on a mountain and spoke in such a way that their bones shook with fear.
Right.
It didn't work. So now I'm going to come down in a way that is the polar opposite, not atop of a mountain, but in a manger.
Mm.
Not with some booming voice, but in the sight of an innocent child. It doesn't get more accessible and personal and beautiful than that imagery.
Right.
And like, that's what this is all about, is ultimately even his way of now this time of year connecting with what is broken and lost and forgotten and hurtful and everything else. And then if that isn't enough, then he would become literally the worst parts of all of us on the cross.
Right.
That's mind blowing. So that when God looks at us, no matter who you are out there, just simple trust and faith in him, that you're washed clean. I mean, that's amazing. And that's the beauty of this story, is God going, okay, you're never going to be able to sacrifice enough. You're never going to be able to get it right enough. You're never going to knock it out of the park enough, because my standard's perfect, and you never have been, and you never will be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming to you.
Yeah. So good.
There it is.
So good. That's good. I want to let you end on that. Every time you start to talk, something else comes up. We were at a Lecrae concert, and we had left the Lecrae concert, as me and a friend of mine, and we were about to get some food. And this homeless guy, pretty rough looking, comes by, and you can tell it's one of the homeless guys you don't want to mess with.
Right.
Right. He looked angry. And my buddy goes, "Hey man, Jesus loves you." And I was like, "Oh, sweet." The guy's response immediate was like, I can't even repeat the words. Like it was, because I gotta put that this is family oriented material.
We have no bleep button. We aren't at that level
No,
yet.
so he said,
Sound like Morse code?
right?
Got it.
And I was shocked. I was like, oh my goodness, this is not good. And then his next response was, I cannot get behind a God that would send his own son to die. That's messed up. And immediately when I heard that, I didn't have a response. And I'm, you have those moments where you're like, man, I should have said this, or I should have said that. It wasn't for that time. It was for me. Because as I thought about that and really had to process that, because it took me, sideways. But what I realized was Jesus had a choice. Jesus could have said, I'm not going to do this. Jesus could have said, yeah, take this cup. I don't want it. He knew everything. He knew what was about to happen. And he took that out of love, because he knew he was the only one capable of.
That's it.
And I'm going to go further. He knew the power and the might and the glory and the goodness of his Father, and truly what eternity is. He recognized the character and every detail, that it was going to be okay. I don't know about you, but that and this whole conversation, the incredible love, and when people talk about the scandal and truly how he disrupted, the scandal and the disruption is actually more comforting than numbing.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I wanted to talk about this so much, is as I read this more and more and talk to more and more people, I believe we have become numb.
Yeah.
with the true purpose of Jesus and why he lived, not why he died, but why he lived. And that's to be expected, right? I mean, just like these other gods that were created in myths and stuff. I mean, Satan was around too for a very long time.
Yeah.
He knew the plan, and he knew he needed to disrupt this in some way, but he could never match it in the same way, ever. And this is the only story that has that power and the love.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Don't say you can't land that plane, man.
Chew on that.
Landed that plane. Get out of here with that.
So, love you guys. Here's what we're going to do going into Christmas. So today we've just hope we gave you some things to think about on, who Jesus really was. And I believe that strengthens our faith in the deep love that he has for us. That it's so much more than the numbing that's happening. And then two, our next episode ending out the year is going to be, how can we trust this?
Yeah.
How do we know it's real?
Love it.
So, and I think that's important. So hope you join us next time. One Love HTX, whosoever's HTX, westcliff.org. Let's have some more fun. Love you guys.
Love you guys. Bye.